So today's panel discussion is going to focus on 3 things your spreadsheets won't tell you. I want to start by introducing our panelists. First, we have Benny Arbor, who is the CEO of Goldco, which is a 46-unit Burger King franchisee. Brian Anthony is the CIO of Star Chasers, a 37-unit Carl's Jr. franchise. And Chris Dufresne is the CFO of Lehigh Valley, a 21-unit Red Robin franchisee. And then our moderator today will be Dave Bennett, who is the CEO of Mirus Restaurant Solutions. And Dave has a unique mix of over 30 years experience in both the restaurant and technology industries, including time spent at both Dunkin' Brands and IBM. So with that, I will now turn things over to Dave.
Well, thanks, Leslie, and thanks to everybody who is participating in the webinar here this morning. A quick commercial at the front end. Mirus is a reporting and dashboard and analysis, an information company, if you will, helping restaurants generate improved performance, however you might measure that, whether that's productivity or net income or earnings per share, or however you might measure performance. Our objective is to improve that for restaurant operators through a set of tools that you see. Mirus Enterprise is principally what we're going to be talking about, or the panelists will be talking about later on this morning. But we do have solutions for loss management, scorecard, and a cloud-based manager's log, and currently we're working on a solution for forecasting and in generating more valuable forecasts for restaurant operators. In addition, we maintain an index of the restaurant industry that allows our clients to compare their performance against a broader set of restaurants and markets and so forth.
Welcome. This service is provided by freeconferencecall.com.
Well, there we go. Quick look at our client base.
You entered 106312.
Our clients.
Is this correct? Press 1. There are 13 participants in this conference. This conference is being recorded.
That are all waiting for that message to go by. Our clients range from quick service to fine dining and everything in between, as you can see with the logos here. We also work with both corporate, the owners of these brands in some cases, and in other cases we're working directly with the franchisees. And of course, other situations we work with both corporate and franchisees. So today's focus is much more on the franchise operations side of the fence. But enough about us. Let's get to the panel discussion. What you don't know, what you don't know. In talking with the panelists leading up to this webinar, one of the common topics that kept coming up is that companies that only use spreadsheets to consolidate and analyze information simply don't know what they don't know. Spreadsheets, of course, have been around a long time, and they're not all evil. They're not all bad. For example, they are everywhere. They're relatively inexpensive. Almost everybody knows how to use spreadsheets, and changes to those spreadsheets are typically quite easy to make, and that's also a blessing and a curse. As far as the weaknesses of spreadsheets, spreadsheets can hide some critical information that you need to run your business. The first weakness is that they are inherently manual. Every day, skilled people have to go in there and add the latest information, recalculate things like week-to-date, period-to-date, year-to-date summaries. And that manual effort inevitably creates errors in the data. It might be an inadvertent formula error. It might be fat-fingering a number, or whatever the case. But the audit tools for spreadsheets are fairly limited, so you're never quite sure, is this 100% accurate or 47% accurate or anywhere in between. Spreadsheets also lack detail. There's just not enough rows in a spreadsheet to deal with certain information problems, even if you're running, 30 or 40 restaurants, never mind hundreds or thousands of restaurants. So, check level detail, for example, is just not feasible to look at, within a spreadsheet format. And so the lack of detail is a big issue, and as a result, you work with summarized data. And summarized data, we know, hides a lot of facts. It smooths things over. It averages things. It hides a lot of evils that you would want to know about. And so, first question to our panelists, Benny. Can you tell us something about a daily or a weekly process that you were able to automate that had been done manually before when you were using kind of spreadsheets or other tools?
Yeah, absolutely. Currently, in my 46 restaurants, I have the Radiant, which is a low-hot front of the house, and MenuLink in the back of the house. MenuLink does communicate to Aloha to some extent, which will give us a broader scale of reports. However, when we put Mirus in, we were able to automate reports that basically drives it all the way down to a cashier, and we have an automated report that goes out to all the leadership team above restaurant leaders that, it spells out exactly by the hour what the discounts were, whether it's fire and police, whether it's 100%, coupon, whether it's a void, whether it's things like that. So we can detect on the cashiers exactly, what cashiers are having the higher end of discounts. That's one example of one report that has helped us tremendously on managing the overall gross margin.
Well, thanks, Benny. And Chris, you're in a casual dining environment versus a quick service. Can you tell us about the impact that errors have had in your team's belief in the numbers?
Yeah, Dave. We've prior to Mirus, we've been with Mirus now for about a year and a half here. Prior to Mirus, though, we had the problem where IT kind of controlled our data. So while they did a pretty good job of controlling the data, they didn't always know what the right numbers were to send out when somebody asked for a report. So our operators would get the reports, they were either Access reports or Excel reports, and they'd get the reports and IT didn't track the right data, and the managers knew that the data wasn't accurate. So, virtually at some point, almost every report was questioned if it didn't, suit the results that the manager was looking for. It was questioned if the data's not right, are we sure the data's right? So our company would spend a lot of time making sure we go back now and we verify and say, yeah, it's right. And, 95% of the time or so it was probably right, but there were a few times when the managers were correct. So it just gave doubt to our managers where the data was. Because we had data all over, Access, Excel, or SQL. Some people had it on their laptops. The data was just fragmented, and Mirus has allowed us to put all the data in one place. Everybody knows where to go to find the answer. We no longer have to involve IT in the process. Well,
thanks, Chris. And Brian, I know you've worked with all kinds of data in your experience over the last 5-6 years or so. Can you give us an example of some detailed data that you have access today where, perhaps in the past you had to live with summarized data because it wasn't feasible to look at the detail with spreadsheets?
Well, specifically, what Mirus does that spreadsheets don't do is hunt down very specific exceptions to the rules. We are lucky enough that we have so many sources that are integrated with Mirus now that we can really drill down and find out some of the causality of what happens with net sales and whatnot. In terms of the question that you're asking, Dave, is about building revenue or?
Well, you have a pretty broad range of application and benefit, but I know in some cases you're examining inventory activity, for example,
Sure.
at a very granular level today that probably was not feasible back in the days of spreadsheets.
Sure. We've integrated our inventory module with Mirus probably about 2.5 years ago, which was an epic undertaking. And one of the things that we were able to do to build, numbers down to the bottom line that spreadsheets just couldn't do is let's say, for example, looking at off-menu items that we all have in our stores, is that when an off-menu item isn't presented on the menu board, it's relatively easy to change the prices of that menu item, but at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice ADQs. So after we integrated inventory, we started really pressing the envelope for the prices for those off-menu items and keeping a very, very close eye on what the actual ADQs of those items were. And over, about a 6-month period, we were able to add for 36 stores, right around $290,000 worth of net sales immediately without having to sacrifice any of the ADQs. So just bumping the price of an item up 10 cents per item, and then just watching it and watching what the effects are of the ADQs of those items is a real good example of very, very difficult to do with inside of a spreadsheet, like you were saying, Dave. Because that's based off all of check level details. So very, very difficult to do inside of spreadsheets.
Right.
Another thing that was very, very beneficial for us is when we went to Mirus. The inventory project was, pretty far down the line for us as we became customers of yours. But early on, when we went to Mirus, we made the decision when we did the original integration is that we were going to use Mirus data for punch-in, punch-out data to actually submit to our payroll company. And that alone was a huge benefit, just in the fact that what was in the store is what was getting loaded into ADP is what we use. We were able to eliminate one job position within our company in the HR department to submit all those hours biweekly to the payroll company. And the amount of errors that we reduced from doing that was very, very substantial.
Excellent, Brian. Thank you for those examples. We'll be back at you in a minute here with some other questions. So, Leslie was talking about 3 things, and this is our 3 things slide. We've talked about some of the reasons why you might not be able to answer some of the business questions with spreadsheets and how to get those answers, right? Each, Chris and Benny and Brian has started sharing how they are getting the answers to those questions. Now we'll dive in a little more specifically into loss or fraud, who's stealing from you. Labor is a pretty broad area these days, everything from the Affordable Care Act to productivity metrics to, are we using our labor in the most intelligent way, hour by hour, location by location, day by day. And the third area is revenue building and how can you use information to improve margins, improve your bottom line and profitability of operation. So let me toss another question to Benny. Fraud, you mentioned some discounts in your first comment. Can you go in a little deeper in terms of what is that, if you compare and contrast, the way you were doing it maybe 3-4 years ago, how you do it
Mm-hmm.
today, and what has that meant to your business?
Yeah, so we put in the new POS system, which is, again, Radiant Menu Link. It's probably been more than 7 years ago, and we were able to get a really nice, solid product line variance from the theoretical to actual food costs, which Mirus can do now as well. We were able to get that and get it down to a science, and it was telling us that we actually had that. The problem was that we could not get detail all the way down to exactly find out where it was coming from. And as we all know in the business today, it's very difficult to catch a thief in the restaurant. So we went ahead and put security systems in, and then I have smart audits that go along with that. And that helped a little bit. But again, that's on a broader scale, and it doesn't really get down to that individual cashier that may be working a drive-thru or front counter or anything like that. So then when we put Mirus in, we were able to drill down all the way down to the specific cashier and determine and detect what their movements were, whether it was customer recovery, whether it was 100%, in doing fraudulent things like that. And we've been able to move the actual PLB from a 1.5%, which our threshold is 1.1, all the way down to 1%, just in about 6 months with Mirus and detecting some of the thieves that we had actually inside the restaurant. So it's really been very helpful for us.
So just to make sure I understand, a half a point, when you say 1.5 down to 1, that's half a point of revenue. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Right. So, yeah, that's a good detailed example. That by itself doesn't necessarily change the world, but it's a nice start in terms of recovering money that rightfully is yours, right? I mean,
exactly.
You sold the item, you cooked the item, and maybe you weren't getting the cash into the bank account. So, yeah, very nice. And now, is there any reaction from the staff? Is there? How has the team reacted to that?
Yeah, typically, I mean, quite honestly, we pay, bonus monthly, and so we incent the restaurants that are hitting the targets, and I call them leading indicators. And some of those leading indicators is managing the food costs, labor, and obviously upselling, things like that, along with speed of service. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, the good ones are going to wait out the bad. And it does create turnover, which costs the company a little money on that standpoint. But, once you get a good mix in there, it'll calm down. You keep people honest for a little bit. And then, as long as you got the reporting coming in daily, you may have a little hiccup where some fall off the wagon, if you will. And then guess what? You have the reports detected, and you keep clipping them off if it does happen. So, letting them know that you're watching every day helps keep exactly
honest people honest. Right. Well, thank you, Benny.
Absolutely.
Chris, in your experience, we talked a little bit about labor and it's how you've been able to use information to do things like manage overtime. And can you walk us through a little bit of your experience as it relates to managing labor better through better use of data?
Yeah, we use multiple tools to monitor labor, mostly because, as I said, we've only been a Mirus customer for about a year and a half, so we're still trying to build our Mirus report base here, and Mirus can do a lot more for us than it's doing from what I see. It's just a matter of us getting the resource to build the reports. But some of the things that we use Mirus for, we do a 30-hour report so we can better comply with the PPACA rules and regulations. Get sent out to our managers so they're aware of that. We have an overtime warning report that sends an alert to our managers when they're coming close to the overtime. And we also have overtime reports by department, so it makes it easier for our higher level regional operations directors who aren't in the restaurant every day, to see what departments in our restaurants might be struggling with staffing or that type of stuff because their labor is high because of overtime. It's also, we've made labor overtime in particular a part of their scorecard. So it's constantly now in front of them. Like I said in the past, we had overtime reports and labor reports, but, because the numbers weren't 100% trusted, some of the managers were actually doing their own and they were using wrong information. not picking up everybody and stuff. So it's just made it more consistent and stuff. And, we've been able to reduce overtime, not labor, but overtime by about 25 to 30% here. And like I said, the benefit we see in Mirus is we're using a bunch of tools right now to do this. As we start, we'll be able to migrate a lot of those reports and functionality over to Mirus, in which case we'll be able to eliminate some tools and make it even easier at that point. But that's just the process that we have to go through.
Is there, it seems like 25% to 30% reduction in overtime can be a pretty significant number. Is there any Affordable Care Act type impact or use of the data that you can share with us?
Yeah, as I said, we use a 30-hour report. We grandfathered everybody in who already worked here and stuff, because we're not a company that likes to take away from people. We had insurance even before PPACA became law. But we use a 30-hour report. We do have a payroll company that has a tool to do it, but it's not accurate yet. As many of them are not accurate because they're still building out their models. Since Mirus can go right into the POS, and we use Aloha and MenuLink also, coincidentally. But since Mirus can go right in there, the report that we get from Mirus is much more accurate currently than what our payroll company report is.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. Brian, again, you've covered a pretty broad area as it relates to use of information and really have been innovative. And in particular, building revenues it has been a focal point for you, and you've used technologies like SMS text messaging, and you've been doing some price adjustments, and all of that is really aimed at trying to increase traffic, increase revenues, and so forth. Are there some specific examples that you can share with us this morning?
Yeah, we have our company. We have two homegrown marketing tools that we use. One is, like you mentioned, the text message-based marketing campaigns that we run on a weekly basis, and we also have a loyalty program that is built. Both those companies that are not Mirus, when we made the original arrangements with them, we made it a requirement that data has to be tied back out into Mirus itself. So we were able to track what the memberships are of those two programs. As the programs have been evolving over the years, our text message program has been running now for 4.5 years, 5 years, and our loyalty program just celebrated its year anniversary back in May. And what we're able to find is that the tools, this is the important part, is that the tools that those companies have to be able to analyze the data is not as complete as what you would want. And what I mean by that is that when you're able to take data from another data source, such as, for us, we use Waterfall for our text message-based campaigns, and we use Beanstalk for our loyalty engine, is that the data is not complete, Dave. Is that when you have the ability to tie that data back into the actual check-level detail data, then it opens up a million possibilities for you to actually look for the exceptions. And Mirus, to me, is I don't necessarily care about the normal. Is what Mirus does to me is it looks through the several, $40,000, $50,000 worth of transactions every day, and it's only going to present to me the ones that meet the criteria of the report that I've written, the exceptions. And what's very beneficial for us is that, we're getting one set of data that is from our other vendor that's saying, well, here's your membership, here's the people that have used it and whatnot. But when you can start tying that back into, okay, what is the actual pattern of Dave Bennett as a person? And how does Dave Bennett react to this type of offer versus another type of offer? And then we can start, cross-pollinating. Dave Bennett, his age is X, and, this type of offer that we have given out, does Dave Bennett react the same way in his age group? Has been very, very beneficial, where we've really learned that we need to tailor make certain types of offers in both the text message-based campaigns and also in the loyalty campaigns based off of the type of customer that we have. So our programs have definitely evolved because of the data within Mirus. And, having the ability to look at, grab multiple sources worth of data and be able to cross-pollinate them over all the data that we have has been very, very beneficial to us.
So what we just heard from our panelists here is that, it comes down to tools, right? It comes, it revolves around a report writer, the ability to build new perspectives of data. Brian mentioned exception-based is really his preferred way of looking at the data. It's not the normal stuff. It's the stuff that falls out of the normal boundaries, and the ability to go at the data and to answer a question you've never asked before. That ad hoc capability is also central to what these three panelists this morning have been sharing. So, and that's at the heart and soul of what Mirus Enterprise brings to the table. Brian mentioned being able to blend together data from very disparate systems, whether it's your drive-through system or an SMS text messaging system or the point of sale or back office or whatever you might have, and then having these tools to really do that slicing and dicing and blending so that you gain new insight that normally you would never be able to see within spreadsheets for sure, but even as you've heard the panelists this morning, even with some of the other reporting tools that are out there in the industry. And so those are the keys to success. Those are the tools we think you need to know what you need to know. So at this point, let me open it up to the audience and see if there are any questions for our panelists before we move forward. Don't be shy. Well, our panelists must have done a fabulous job in explaining themselves. So if you do have any questions, by all means, here's 4 different ways of contacting us. A copy of today's slides will be sent to all of the attendees. Obviously, I want to thank our panelists for sharing their thoughts with us, and thank all of the attendees for joining us this morning. If with the slides, you'll have all of our contact information. By all means, reach out to us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or through our website and our blog. We hope you learned some valuable lessons or receive some valuable information for your company this morning that perhaps you can put in place this week, next week,